There's a reasonably new and niche branch of economic theory which looks at popular narratives or stories and how these spread over time in order to explain economic fluctuations such as recessions. This is known as narrative economics. It's likely that we underestimate the impact that certain narratives have on the economy and indeed our everyday lives. The term homo narrans, meaning storytelling human, says that telling stories is what makes us inherently human. This video will tie in with a book by Robert Shiller called Narrative Economics. He defines a narrative as a simple story or easily expressed explanation of events that many people want to bring up in conversation, or on news or social media, because it can be used to stimulate the concerns or emotions of others, or because it appears to advance their self-interest. This idea may give some initial insight as to why narratives or stories can have such a large impact on an economy. A compelling story will be retold and will spread much in the same way as an infectious disease. Stories and ideas are contagious. If a certain story stimulates people's emotions or helps them to better put across a point they already believe in, this story will spread quickly. If a story spreads across an entire nation, it can change what that nation as a whole believes in. This, in turn, can cause protests, change government policy, or swing an entire election. It's worth noting that, although I have likened narratives to infectious diseases, narratives are not necessarily bad things. They just spread using similar dynamics. This video focuses on recessions, so some of these narratives are of course going to be negative, but some of the narratives mentioned in this video are still true and have caused good outcomes overall. Shiller in his book tried to explain a number of major recessions using narratives and beliefs that were circulating at the time. It is important to note that we aren't saying that narratives are the only thing causing recessions. There are often many different factors which may combine to cause a recession, and narratives are just one of these. Narratives are often very important because uncertainty is a key factor in causing recessions. Rumours and ill-informed stories can and do lead to more of this uncertainty. One such instance of uncertainty caused a sharp recession in the USA and a number of other countries in the year 1920. Perhaps the most widely accepted reason given for this recession was the Federal Reserve increasing interest rates to battle high inflation. However, there were also a number of unsettling narratives going around at this time, which Shiller says contributed to economic uncertainty and ultimately the recession. 1920 was a year surrounded by many negative events. World War I had only just ended, there was an extremely deadly influenza epidemic still going on, a series of race riots, there was a widespread fear of communism, and there was a large oil price shock, just to name a few. Each of these factors gave rise to various narratives published in newspapers or rumours spreading around that, quite understandably, made people very uncertain and even afraid about what was going to happen in the US economy. If people are uncertain, they tend to reduce their spending on big things like cars and houses, because it's safer to hold on to your money until you have a clearer idea of what's going to happen. The economy will thus slow down and potentially go into recession. Let's look at one particular narrative that was circulating around this time. Wars cause a massive reduction in supply of certain goods, whether it be due to factories being destroyed or countries no longer trading with each other, which means prices can rise quite dramatically. We even see rationing of food during wars due to a reduction in supply. It thus seems to make sense that, once the war was over, prices would return to their old levels. However, immediately after World War I, this did not happen. The war ended in 1918, but prices for many goods continued to rise quite dramatically until 1920. A number of economists have blamed policymakers for being too expansionary immediately after the war. This meant that people wanted to buy things in 1919 and 1920, but supply still hadn't caught up. Factories take time to rebuild, and countries don't immediately start trading with one another again after a war. Prices will thus take a little while to go back to their pre-war levels, and perhaps never will completely return. However, at the time, many people blamed the post-war price increases on people labelled as profiteers. This was a narrative that spread saying that the high prices were due to business people exploiting the war for their own personal profit. Many believed that prices were high not because businesses had low supply and high costs, but because they were deliberately keeping prices high to make more profit. To add to this, newspapers in 1920 were reporting that a number of prices had fallen to their pre-war levels. Only a small minority of prices were actually falling, but newspapers knew that their readers were interested in stories like this because many were hoping for prices to fall. This is a fairly standard thing for newspapers to do, with journalists not telling a lie, but painting a picture or a narrative that is not actually reflective of reality in order to better engage their readers. Shiller says this fueled the profiteer narrative, as people believed prices should be falling, but they were in fact not doing so. Here's a quote from an author called Henry Hazlitt in 1920. This basically says that every business owner would complain about others setting their prices too high, but then proceed to set their own prices much higher than usual as well. The story goes that people were so quick to blame each other for prices being high that they didn't realise how hypocritical they were being. The war was over and everyone, quite reasonably, was desperate for things, including prices, to go back to normal. However, simply wanting prices back to normal isn't enough to make it actually happen. Due to this narrative, many actively refused to buy things from others. Even a US Senator, Arthur Capper, was reported in January 1920 as saying profiteers are more dangerous than Reds. Reds here being communists. He even told consumers to refuse to buy goods that were overpriced, and that is exactly what many people did. Not only did narratives tell people to expect prices to fall soon, but they also made people angry, as they believed businesses were being immoral with their prices. Delaying spending until the prices fell, to many seemed to be an obvious strategy. This meant 1920 was a year of people saving their money and spending as little as possible. People not buying things inevitably meant businesses had to close down, the economy stagnated, and we had a very sharp recession. So, that is a possible explanation for a recession in 1920 based purely on stories. If people believe prices are going to fall, they will stop spending. It doesn't matter if this belief is reasonable or not, it only matters that people believe it. Now, there's no way of saying whether this profiteer narrative actually caused the recession. It's very difficult to say the exact impact a story has on an economy. Who knows exactly how many people have heard the story, how many believe it, and how many actually act on it. All we're saying here is that this narrative surely had some impact, and thus likely contributed to this recession. No matter the exact impact of narratives in this one case, it should be clear to see that a story can have a very large impact. An economy is made up of people doing things, and a story can and will change what people do. We've seen here the type of story that is more likely to grip a nation and have an impact. One type is the story which gives us the belief that we can gain something, which is often some monetary reward. In this case, people believed they could gain from delaying their spending and buying things cheaper in the future. Other examples include speculative bubbles, such as people believing an investment in housing was guaranteed to make them money. There is even a widely used expression, as safe as houses, which can be interpreted as meaning that almost nothing is safer than an investment in a house. This belief drove house prices up and contributed to the housing crisis and subsequent 2008 Great Recession. Another element that might make a narrative contagious is a conspiracy theory. A concept which is linked to this is a belief we can describe as us versus them. People inherently like to find a satisfying explanation for things, and often want someone to blame for why things are going wrong. Sometimes it's reasonable to blame that person or thing, and sometimes it isn't. In this case, people blame businesses for having high prices. Conspiracy theories are often unorthodox and thus interesting, so they'll usually be shared with others. One such conspiracy that is relevant at the moment surrounds the vaccine for coronavirus. Many don't trust this vaccination for various reasons. Some of these concerns are valid, with this vaccination not being tested for as long as many other vaccines. There are also some other beliefs circulating which don't have much evidence to back them up, such as that the vaccine contains a microchip being used to monitor people. Whether or not people's concerns are valid, news outlets will tend to report on things that tie in with these beliefs, however minor, because those are the sorts of stories that people will find interesting and thus will read. These stories can fuel the conspiracy theories and people's fears, giving the narrative even more traction and giving it a larger impact. Some will say newspapers are being irresponsible by reporting on certain things, but they're just appealing to our basic human instincts. We like stories, and that is what keeps journalists and indeed all types of storytellers in business. This ties into another characteristic of narratives that will spread quickly, those with fear factor. Stories that instill fear in people can spread very quickly and are likely to have a larger impact. People will often take action in response to fear. For example, fear of an economic crash might stop you from spending. However, there are many other types of fear which can stimulate action. One such fear is fear for your own personal safety. One recent example of this sparked huge protests across the globe in response to the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Many Black Americans were, and are, afraid of the police force due to a number of incidents where police officers have killed unarmed civilians. This story was accompanied by a strong sense of injustice and a very powerful video, which all combined to make the story of George Floyd spread across the world extremely quickly. It almost goes without saying the huge impact this narrative has had, not only on the US police force or even in changing things like diversity policies all over the world, but perhaps most importantly, this story has changed social norms and our behaviours around what is acceptable to say or do. The overall impact of this is immeasurable. Stories that are simple and easier to understand are also more likely to spread and have an impact. An example could be in the Brexit referendum in the UK, when the country decided whether or not to leave the European Union. The campaign to leave the EU used a very simple narrative referring to the £350 million annual membership cost for the UK, and how this could be spent on healthcare instead. This narrative was very popular because it is simple to understand and, well, people like healthcare. The UK did end up leaving the EU, but there has not been much evidence of higher healthcare spending as a result of this. There are many other characteristics that can make a story spread quickly. These can also be positive things. It might be funny, heartwarming, or inspiring. An example of an objectively good narrative is Captain Tom Moore, the 99-year-old war veteran who raised £33 million for the NHS in 2020 by walking around his backyard. This story inspired many others to either raise money themselves or simply to keep going through lockdown. These narratives are likely to play an even more important role in today's world than they have in the past. Technology such as social media has advanced so that stories can be shared across the world in seconds. In the past, only established news companies could share information, but now anyone at all can post a story online. These stories can be completely fabricated, so false narratives can spread and be very damaging to people or whole economies. However, the idea of fake news, while perhaps being more common, is definitely not new. Narratives with no factual basis have been spread and believed for as long as stories have been around. For example, until surprisingly recently, many believed that women were not capable of doing the same jobs as men, or that some racial groups were not capable of integrating into civilized society. How people could actually believe this seems crazy, because we're no longer immersed in all the stories and narratives that came along with these beliefs. People do have a tendency to believe what they're told. This means narratives are extremely powerful, and that's why we use them so often. Recessions, protests, and changes in policy are just a few of the many things which can come about from one simple story. That will wrap up this video, but I have only scratched the surface of the narratives mentioned, so I shall go into more detail in separate videos. So look out for those, leave a like if you found this video at all interesting, and subscribe to add some econ to your subscription feed.